You're someone with a vision for your practice, for your side hustle, and for your personal journey. But when it comes to establishing your path on how to get to where you want to be with your practice, things get a little messy. You're also someone who'd prefer to go in person instead of to groups and listening to everyone else's story. To me, it sounds like you could benefit from one on one consulting with our experienced practice of the practice consultants. From $5.95 a month and up, you can work with a consultant that will give you more direction and practical, tried and tested tips matched to you and your goals. For more information, visit practiceofthepractice.com/apply. Again, that's practiceofthepractice.com/apply. This is the Practice of the Practice podcast with Joe Sanok, session number 1177. I'm Joe Sanok, your host, and welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast. I hope you are having an amazing day. We help you 3 to 5 days a week, depending on how many episodes we're doing, to build a thriving private practice you absolutely love. And this month, we are taking a little bit of a break from that because last month we went full tilt into marketing. Before that, we did the Even Better Year series. But this month, we're talking about better mental wellness. So we are digging into all sorts of different topics. We kicked off the month. That was episode 1174 on research on psychedelic assisted therapy. Then we talked about self-compassion. And in the last episode, we talked about deeper mindfulness. So all sorts of really interesting things going on. Today, we have Nicole Sachs with us. Nicole is an LCSW psychotherapist, leading mind-body clinician, and host of the Cure for Chronic Pain podcast, founder of the Break Awake community, and author of the book that just came out, Mind Your Body. Diagnosed with a degenerative spinal condition, Nicole faced a future of debilitating pain. After discovering Dr. John Sarno's work in her mid-20s, she reclaimed her life through mind-body medicine and was a discipline of Dr. Sarno. So over 20 years, Nicole has researched chronic conditions, guided many to freedom from chronic illness through her psychotherapy practice, podcast, courses, retreats, and communities. Her mind-body approach delineates the brain science beyond chronic illness and explains how our physical, mental, and emotional systems are working together to keep us safe. Nicole, welcome to the Practice of the Practice podcast.
Thanks for having me, Joe.
Yeah, I am really excited to have you on the show. When I was a freshman in college, when I was 19, I was home. We went snowboarding here in northern Michigan, and all day it had been a beautiful, like fluffy snow day. We were doing dumb stuff off these jumps, and we went to lunch, came back, and it all iced up. And I was coming towards this one jump, and it was like pure ice, and I knew it as I was approaching this jump, and spun backwards, flipped over, landed on my face, and didn't know I had herniated 3 discs. And spent the next year of my freshman year and sophomore year of college going through like all sorts of different treatments. Ended up going to Mayo Clinic and having back surgery. At the end, I was in a wheelchair, and they found that I had a spinal stenosis with 3 herniated discs. The doctor said it was the worst back he had ever seen in someone that was, in their 20s. So most of my life, I can relate with you around chronic, like fatigue, chronic, just like pain. I'm type 1 diabetic. I'm sure everyone that does a podcast is like, here's all my laundry list of stuff. So I get it. And this is such an important topic. And in that treatment, I went to PT, learned a bunch of exercises, had some aqua therapy, I've been in and out of things over the last 20 plus years. And the whole mind body side of it has almost never been something that they talked about. So thank you for the work you're doing that we're going to talk about. I can't wait to dig in today.
Wow, you have quite the story, huh?
Yeah, I've been through a couple things with my body. Yeah, my mom definitely gave me a lot of the ailments that came through her family genetics.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because your story I've heard many times in different iterations. And what's really fascinating and sort of my biggest desire when it comes to being out here in the world and talking about chronic pain, chronic illness, chronic anxiety, and all the related things is to invite people to understand that there may be another way to look
Mm.
at your journey, however it looked. We all have our different journeys, and to see it through the lens of brain science in the way that I have learned over the years and lived, because my problem also began at 19, interestingly enough. And so anyway, it's always a really fascinating conversation, because you're right, it isn't taught nearly enough in medical schools or through the world of PT. But what I'm inspired by is that it's really beginning to be invited. You speak of the Mayo Clinic. That's one of the places that has my website on their on their website. Like, I'm sorry, my podcast. They have my podcast on their website because they are starting to recognize that if we look at our health holistically through a mind body lens, as well as all of these very legitimate medical procedures, we give people a lot more power.
Yeah, and I think that sometimes the conversation, it starts with, like, "You can heal yourself with this essential oil. You can heal yourself with this pH balanced water. You can heal yourself with meditation." And then there's things that, are just medical conditions. And so it becomes, unfortunately, this like either or, that you're either on the side of kind of non-traditional, like less Western medicine, or you're on the side of science and of Western medicine and kind of a disease-based approach. What do you think about that split?
I think that split is an old idea that is not working for us anymore.
Yeah.
And I think many, many people in the medical profession and in the wellness and in the psychological world agree. So I guess the best way for me to begin that conversation, because it's really important for people not to get confused, is that what I'm teaching you, you already believe. So I could be lecturing to a room of, let's call it 500 people, and I can say, raise your hand if you've ever had a really stressful day, you're going through it, and you got a headache. And every hand in the room will go up because, we've all understood that experience. And I say, okay, okay, great. Now keep your hand up if that night you ran to the ER for a CT scan of your brain, certain that there's something desperately wrong with you. And most people laugh, right? And all the hands go down. And I say, if you can just shake the etch a sketch of your mind for one moment and just give me a clear screen, what I'm going to help you understand is that we all believe that emotional stimuli can cause physical reactions. The most ubiquitous one is what happens when you're either moved or sad or upset for some reason. Water falls out of your face, you cry. We all have physical responses to emotional stimuli, and like it goes on and on. People panic and they get hives. People get bad news and they lose their appetite. So once I get people understanding that I'm not saying anything unusual, I'm just helping people understand that when something becomes chronic and that they're convinced that it has something to do with a part of them that is inextricably broken for whatever reason. And I use that term broken loosely because it doesn't have to be a bone. It could be, well, your mom and your grandmother got migraines. So, of course, now you have migraines. Whatever it is that we use to define our experience, that can be a real barrier to health. Because when people understand that emotional stimuli can cause physical conditions, then they can start opening their mind to the fact that chronic conditions are the same. One of the longest running best-selling books in the wellness space is Bessel van der Kolk's The Body Keeps the Score. People do understand on some level that when we have stored trauma and when we have unresolved or unconscious level of stress and emotional response, the body's going to show it somewhere. It lowers our immune system. You're more likely to get a cold, but it's so much bigger than that. And so essentially for the last 20 years, I've been first in my own life, which we can talk about my story a little if you're interested. And then through my private practice, and then by writing books and podcasts and stuff, I'm starting to really help people realize they have so much more power than they realize to affect their physical and emotional health.
Mm. Yeah, let's dig into your own story, because I think that, it's one thing when someone's a researcher and a writer, and maybe they've experienced some things, but you've had some major stuff hit your life, and then you've had to, in real time, apply this. What's that looked like?
So interestingly enough, freshman in college, 19, just like you, Joe,
Hmm.
I did not have the kind of acute incident you had, but I did have an acute pain experience, which is I was at a particularly stressful time in my freshman year, and there's a lot of history behind what led me there, and my back went out. So you hear people say all the time, I don't know what I did. I reached for, that toy on the top shelf, or I lifted a suitcase and my back went out completely. So that's what happened to me. I became overnight completely disabled. So my parents had to come to college and physically carry me home. No joke. Like I needed help using the bathroom. Like I was completely disabled. And I underwent, responsibly so, all of the medical tests, x rays, MRIs, orthopedic surgery consults. And what was discovered is that I had a finding called degenerative spondylolisthesis, which is an abnormality of the lower spine. Apparently, it looks pretty gnarly on film. And so when I went for the consult for the surgery, they basically said, this is one of the more serious cases we've seen. And it was like a very kind of fraught moment, being 19, you can imagine. And they said, spinal fusion surgery is not recommended right now because it's a pretty major surgery and it will decrease your mobility for life. So if you can just live under the parameters that we say, maybe you can make it to 40 without putting yourself in a wheelchair. So it was really, really heavy. And they
Wow,
basically
what a
were
thing
like,
to deal with as a 19-year-old. Oh my gosh.
it was crazy. I remember it really like it was yesterday. They do say the brain encodes our more traumatic moments because, of course, through the lens of evolutionary biology, we need to remember the hard things so we don't reenact them, and so that usually translates into human life with remembering these crazy events. And so I remember laying on the table and my mother wringing her hands, and they said, no more exercise. Travel needs to be very scant. You shouldn't ride in the car for more than an hour at a time because of the bouncing motion, certain very specific positions that I had to sleep. And they said at 19 to me, the likelihood that you will carry a biological child to term is almost none, unless you want to be on about 7-8 months of bed rest, because it just would be too much of an inciting incident for your back. And so that was a pretty crazy thing to hear, at that age when you're so full of wonder and, it's the beginning of your life essentially. Um, and so that kind of launched me, with enough steroids and muscle relaxers. I went from acute pain to chronic pain, and I was able to return to school with like a handicapped sticker on my car and all the things that went on during those years of my life. Um, but essentially, if we're going to fast forward, because we can't have time to hear my whole life story. When I was in my 20s in grad school, getting my master's in social work, I came upon the work of a doctor at NYU Rusk in New York City called Dr. John Sarno. And he had a theory called mind body medicine, something I had never heard of. And the premise of it was that yes, there are all sorts of structural findings, bulging discs, spondylolisthesis, and other, stenosis, all these things, and they are real and they are legitimate. And these people who are suffering are in real pain. The pain is not in your head. You're not making it up. You're not sensitive or hysterical. And there is brain science behind why the brain and the nervous system send pain signals to different muscle groups and inflammation and neuropathy to different bodily systems. There's more to understand about the functioning of the human body. And when you do, you understand that when people are living in long-term fight or flight, which the human body is not built for. We're built for short bursts, right? Get you out of danger. But when we're living in a long-term fight or flight situation, which unfortunately is the reality for most of us in 21st century world society, for many different reasons, the nervous system can become confused and start sending pain signals to different parts of the body and inflammation and neuropathy that are deemed by the mind body system as the weaker spots. Because what's happening is we are being quote unquote protected by our pain. It slows us down. It causes us to, take better care of ourselves, ask for help, all the things that are deemed, places of safety, places of nurturance. And so it was an interesting concept, and I guess in a podcast like this where I only have such a brief time to explain it, what I really wanna do is just help people replace their skepticism or their fear with curiosity. That's all I want, because by doing that for myself at such a young age and by understanding Dr. Sarno's theories, I decided to try mind body work for myself, which is, it's an involved process. It's not complicated, but it's not easy because it requires us to sort of take back our agency and to not expect someone else to fix us. But by unearthing the what I call the emotional reservoir, the place where unconsciously our nervous system is being triggered into this long-term fight or flight, and understanding in different very very basic ways that we're safe, which, by the way, we all think we might understand, but this is a very interesting unconscious process when you learn about the brain science. When I did that work, my pain went away completely. So now you find me at age 52. So it's been a minute since I've been 19 and doing all this stuff through my 20s. And I have been chronic pain free for over 20 years. I gave birth to 3 children. I exercised till the day
Mm.
they were born. I travel. I do anything. I can run 5 miles on the beach, and I have the exact same films, the exact same diagnosis. So I do have spondylolisthesis. It never indeed degenerated, so that was a bit of a misunderstanding at that point. I It was never the reason for my pain, but it was a very logical connection to pain because it makes sense. But the brain science and the mind body medicine makes even more sense now that I've obviously spent 20 years practicing and working with people all around the world. But the most stunning thing about it is watching people who are usually very desperate. I mean, my hope with my new book and all the things that are coming in the next few years is to raise the bottom, so have people who don't have to be quite so desperate, having already been on disability and years into this process. My hope is to open this work to many, many more people that are just, dealing with troublesome headaches or a little back pain or, what have you. But what's really wonderful about it is helping people understand that when they do this work, they can absolutely change their experience of being live. You won't necessarily change the way your body looks. Like I said, my film looks the same, but I can't count, but let's call it tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people that over the years have written to me or connected with me on some way, because I have this podcast that's been going on since 2018, that have gone from absolute despair to complete freedom. And I know that sounds really crazy, but I mean, like, it happens over and over again. And that's why when I wrote the book, I ended every single chapter with another person's story in their own words, because I want to inspire people to just get curious and learn about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you have people like Ariana Huffington, Gabby Bernstein, you got Michael Porter from the Denver Nuggets, that, Dan Siegel, Ricky Lake. I mean, so many people that are like, you've helped me out. As a therapist, I can tell you from experience that having the right EHR is an absolute lifeline. I recommend using therapy notes. They make billing, scheduling, note taking, telehealth, and e prescribe incredibly easy. Best of all, they offer live telephone support that's available 7 days a week. You don't have to take my word for it. Do your own research and see for yourself. Therapy Notes is the #1 highest rated EHR system available today, with a 4.9 out of 5 stars on trustpilot.com and on Google. All you have to do is click the link below or type promo code Joe on their website over at therapynotes.com and receive a special 2-month trial absolutely free. Again, that's therapynotes.com and use promo code Joe on the website. If you're coming from another EHR, Therapy Notes will also import your demographic data quick and easy at no cost, so you can get started right away. Trust me, don't waste any more of your time and try Therapy Notes. Just use promo code Joe at checkout. So I know people need to get the book to fully kind of understand this, but what are some things that people in just listening to this podcast can start doing to start to address their own chronic pain or help their clients address it? Now, I know this is a huge issue that, you have your membership community, you have lots of things that dig super deep into it. But what's some of the low hanging fruit that people can start using on themselves or using with clients to help with understanding chronic pain and starting to work with these chronic diseases?
It's a great question. So there are three facets to my work, and I like to look at them as three legs of a stool. The first is belief. And so, under the umbrella of belief, is first of all, pausing this narrative of terror and hopelessness and despair. And the first thing I say, I'm like a bucket of love, which is just something that I know people need, which is I totally get it why you are so despairing and so hopeless. I get it. And this is not to discount that, but it is to say, if you are willing to just make a crack in the armor of your total despair and to say, maybe, just maybe, and this could work for you working with a client or it could be personal. There could be another way to look at this. Maybe, just maybe, I can understand that in the same way I pull my hand from a hot stove or I jump out of the way when something, is coming at me like a moving car. My nervous system, my brain, in a confused attempt to protect me, are sending these pain signals. They are not necessary, but they are deemed necessary. So let me just crack the shell of that hopelessness and say, okay, this sounds a little strange maybe to me, but maybe there's a different way to look at it. So the first thing I want is for people to just pause the dialogue and get curious. And if they are willing to do that, what happens is they're opened up to belief. Belief is what happens when you start looking at the brain science, when you start, I've got, as you said, so many things out there to read and to listen to. So it starts opening you. And the reason that's so important is the only message we need to send to the nervous system is one of safety. The nervous system is a primitive system. Its number one job is to keep us safe and to keep us alive. And so if you start understanding that by seeing this through a different lens, you are sending a message of safety to your nervous system, that is a really, really powerful posture. So that's belief, and that can be really expanded as you learn more about this work. Under the umbrella of do the work is because people are sending their nervous systems into long-term fight or flight because of the overflowing emotional reservoir. The work I teach is to help people address the things that are overflowing. I have like all sorts of very simple, well explained, because I know how much people need explanation, processes to unearth the things safely they need to unearth so the nervous system no longer sees your repressed emotional world as a predator to your life. Because as crazy as that sounds, and this is, by the way, not new. I mean, really, it's becoming more and more accepted that your nervous system cannot discern between emotional and physical threats. Your boss comes in and says, I need to speak to you for a moment. You're going to have the same fight or flight reaction that if someone came in with a gun. It's actually just the capital T truth, and medical doctors agree. And so because of that, we need to slowly and with, a lot of patience for ourselves, take a look at what's in there. So that's the do the work portion that I teach. I have this signature practice I created through my own recovery and through working with many thousands of people around the world, called Journal Speak, which is an expressive writing technique that really helps you get to where you need to go. And then the third leg of the stool, which I heard in your intro you have been talking about on this show, which I love, is the concept of self-compassion, of patience and kindness for yourself. And when I first heard about the concept of self-compassion, I honestly really scoffed at it. I thought, this is trite, okay, I love myself. Let's go, And it's actually, I was very wrong. I love to be wrong, by the way, because I love the opportunity to learn and to say, okay, well, if I don't know everything, then maybe there's help that I don't know about, which is a great feeling. And so patience and kindness in a self-compassion practice are actually incredibly important, because when you're trying to unload years of things that have felt like a danger to your nervous system, meaning your the way you've been treated potentially by your parents, by your society, by your bully that, really had a mark on you from middle school, by, whatever inequity or mistreatment you've experienced in your life that you're really reacting to, the worst predator is often ourselves. I grew up with a really critical dad. He loved me deeply, but he really kind of didn't know how to love properly in that way when you have a young kid. And there was a lot of correction and a lot of criticism. And my God, that man died 25 years ago, and I carried the baton for years and years with his voice in my head, criticizing myself, toxic perfectionism, my own worst critic, in such a way that my voice drowned out all others. And I didn't even know it, And so the self compassion part of this stool is really about understanding the way we can rewire how we treat ourselves, how we speak to ourselves, and how important it is. Because if you're bailing out a boat that has a hole in the bottom, you're really, you're not wasting your time, but you're certainly not going to get anywhere. And so that is the third way I help people bring it all together. And but when people really understand these three facets and do the work directed in the right way, it is astonishing, Joe. I mean, I cannot say it more strongly. Astonishing how they change their lives. And, you mentioned just now a few of the more public figures that are doing my work. And there are many of them, many of them that want to talk about it, many more. For years, I've been working with people with very high profile lives, and they're just like you. They're just like me. Everyone is just the same when they're suffering. And for every one of the people that have spoken out and said what a difference this work has made, there are just so many thousands of people that are just like us, just regular people that are changed. And so it is my passion and my purpose to bring this message to as many people as can hear it.
Mm. Now, what are some habits that you have in your life? Like, what are things that you do every day that are maybe non-negotiables, things that you do every week or every month that just help you continue to live out the work that you're talking about?
I think the first thing I would say is I do not live afraid. I used to. I think so many of us do. You get something going on with you physically, and you're just like, oh my God, what is this? What is this? Is this going to be forever? Is this going to stop me? Is this going to affect my ability to show up? And it's like that fear adds so much more of that message of unsafety to the nervous system, and it perpetuates the problem. And then the concept of the symptom imperative is something I teach often, which is you might come into this work because you have migraines, and you might be doing the work for a bit and the migraines are almost totally relieved, which is, by the way, a very normal and regular experience that I have in working and hearing from people. And then, like, you start getting like stomach issues, your stomach's unsettled, or your back goes out. That's no problem. All that is a symptom imperative. It shows that the nervous system is in a bit of a panic. I call it, it's like you're like a pinball machine, right? And so the ball is bouncing around your body because your nervous system is saying, do you need help? Do you need help? Do you need me to help you there? Do you need to go to bed? Do you need to cancel your plans? Like, I'll help you, I'll help you. And when you really work through that, meaning I show up and I know that my body is on my side. I am not broken. Nothing's against me in my system, but my nervous system is on point. And if it thinks I'm in danger, it's going to protect me. So if I'm having a headache all day because I know that I've been so stressed out about my kids or about my work or about my self image, all the things that can get us going, and I have this headache, instead of saying, oh my God, I'm going to have it tomorrow. Is this going to go on? Am I developing a migraine condition? Instead of saying that, I stop, I pause, my hand to my heart, ground myself a little and say, okay, there are things we need to do. Let's get to the journal speak practice today. Let's make sure of that. Let's get to my meditation practice today. Have I been consistent enough? Where's my self compassion at? Have I been really beating myself up lately? Let me take a look. And instead of focusing on what's wrong with me, I focus on what I can do. And that empowerment is not a cliche. It really changes the way your body begins to function. And so I would say that's my biggest non negotiable. I don't ever like to say, you have to X, right? Like you have to journal speak every day, or you have to meditate every day, or, never talk poorly to yourself. That would be so unrealistic. And I don't want that to be another stress on people that, there's some regimented thing you have to do, but I do want to give you a toolkit. I provide people a toolkit that is an enduring path to healing so that they know what they can reach for when they need it.
Mm. Where do people get stuck with this? I think that sometimes you'll learn things, you'll see some progress, and then people plateau. Like, where do they plateau and get stuck?
There's a couple places that are pretty common. The first is in the space of resistance. So in my book, I have a whole chapter. I wasn't planning on it. And as I was writing it, it kind of revealed itself to me. I have a whole chapter on resistance, all the different ways resistance shows up, because resistance to doing what's good for us is another way the nervous system protects us, because we're such a people that fear failure. We fear the way we'll feel about ourselves. We fear the way we'll be judged in life. And so just think about it. Think about it in a way you already believe. Like, why diet culture is like a multi-trillion-dollar business. It's because people know what to do if they want to lose weight, eat less, exercise more, whatever. But because we are so resistant to what is good for us, there are a zillion different ways that people try to help us go about it. Some good, some not so good. But we all know what it's like to self-sabotage, and it's there, and we are confused. We are confused because it's like, but I want to feel better, but I want to be healthier. Why can't I do this for myself? So what I do is I really help people understand their resistance, because your resistance is really just fear. It's lack of control, which I call fear in fancy clothes. Needing to control things is like fear in fancy clothes. And we work together slowly through the offerings that I have out there to deconstruct resistance and to understand how to get out of our own way. So that's one way people plateau, is to really be buying into their resistance, which unfortunately speaks to you in a very trusted voice, which is your own. It whispers in your ear and it says, you have better things to do. You don't have to journal speak. You don't have to meditate. Just go see another specialist. Maybe there's another pill to take. And I'm not against anything, by the way, just so you know. I'm not against the Western medical model. I'm not against medication, unless it causes people to get into addiction. I'm not against physical therapy. I'm not against anything as long as you can see it through the right lens. And that's what I teach people. So that's one big reason that people get stuck. And I'd say the other is urgency to be well. So many people come into my work and they have been through it. They have surgeries that haven't resolved their pain. They have taken different kinds of medications that haven't worked. They've tried different alternative practices that haven't felt like they were really effective. And so they come to me in a place of real, kind of they've had it. And then they start doing this work and they start actually seeing major changes in them, because this is brain science. It's simple. When your nervous system is in rest and repair, it doesn't send the same pain signals. And so people start feeling that relief and they're like excited. But the problem is excitement can go hand in hand with urgency. Okay, now I want to be totally well. I'm done. I'm done being sick. I'm done being in pain. I'm done having anxiety. I want to be well and I want to be well now. And that urgency sends a message, once again, of unsafety to the nervous system. And then things can flare again. And then they get frustrated. And then they come to me and say, this isn't working for me. And I'm like, I get it. I get it. I've been there. And I help them understand that the only message we need to send to the nervous system is one of safety. I will teach you how to do it. And your urgency is not doing that. And I teach people to wear it loosely. That's like a big trope in my communities. To slow down, to use a lot of pause, helps you respond, not react to life. And we move people through it.
So awesome. Well, the last question I always ask is, if every private practitioner in the world were listening right now, what would you want them to know?
I would want them to know, and this is just like coming very passionately from my own experience of having a private practice. You have the power to truly affect change, not only for other people, but for yourself. I used to love coming into my office and being able to sit across from people, and in that hour that I had with them, really slow down and be with them. What's really extraordinary I've found is that so rarely do people feel partnered with. A lot of people feel really alone. And to have the power and the empathy and the education and the presence to sit down and be that connection for another human being is really a privilege. And I remember when I was going through my clinical master's program, I was young and I was maybe sometimes a little bit disillusioned. I wanted to change the world. So many of us feel that way. And I remember one time in a class, several of us were feeling a little down. And this is just a commonly known story, but I'll tell it really quickly because maybe one of your listeners has not heard it, where they tell the story of the starfish washed up on the ocean. Joe, have you heard that one?
I have. I was actually part of an alternative spring break thing where you like went and volunteered for spring break, and they had the whole story on the back of one of our t-shirts.
All right. Well, I will tell it here really quickly because
Do it. Tell it.
it really helped me. So, in the version I've heard, a little boy and his grandfather are walking on the beach, and there are just thousands of starfish washed up on the shore, and of course, under the hot sun, many of them are going to die. And so his grandfather picks one up and throws it back in the water and picks another one up and throws it back in the water. And after about 5 or 10, the little boy looks up and he looks around at all of the starfish littered all over the ocean, all over the sand. And he says, "Grandpa, why does it even matter? You're never going to make a difference." And his grandfather picks up one and throws it into the water and says, "I made a difference for that one." And that really impacted me. Like, God, telling you that, like, I tear up because it's so moving to me that we have the power as practitioners to make a difference in other people's lives. And I cherish that. And although a few years ago I had to close my practice after about 18, 20 years to focus on doing this on a bigger scale, I still know that that created the foundation upon which I've built everything, and I still feel that feeling because I get to help people on a mass scale. So, that's my little inspiration for the moment.
Nicole, so awesome. If people want to get your book, if they want to find out more about your work, I know you also have a training for clinicians. Tell us about all that work.
Great. Yes, because there's such a passion in me to spread this message far and wide. And of course, for your community, one of the most impactful ways to do that is to train in it and to be able to do this for your own clients. So the easiest way to find me is at NicoleSachs.com, NicoleSach.com, because that has links to absolutely everything I do. Specifically, our practitioner training is called the Sarno Sachs Solution. And the reason why it's exciting for us specifically, on top of everything else that I've been doing over the years, is Dr. Sarno, who is a legend, who is the father of mind body medicine, his daughter, Christina, who is a practicing therapist in New York City and has been for years, just like all of you. She's out there carrying this message to her clients. She and I partnered and we created this training that is keeping really purely to Sarno's vision and that incorporates all that she and I have been doing over these years as best practices. And so we created the Sarno Sachs solution. We have 18.75 CEs for anyone who is interested in using that for their licensure. And we're just hearing great things about it. It recently launched. So there's that. And of course, anything else you're interested in learning for yourself or passing along. My podcast, The Cure for Chronic Pain, is linked at the site, as well as my courses in order to help people heal themselves and many other things. So check it out at NicoleSachs.com.
So awesome. Thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Well, go get that book, Mind Your Body. And thanks so much for hanging out with us today. That starfish story reminded me of a number of these episodes recently of kind of just finding your corner, finding your piece of the puzzle. There are so many things in the world that need improvement, that need our help, that need to be repaired. and it can feel overwhelming. It can be one of those things where it's like, oh my gosh, like I just want to throw up my hands and move into a cabin and go in the woods. And maybe that is what you need. Maybe you need to do that for a little bit. But to do good transformative work, sometimes it means saying, what am I not gonna do? So maybe this year is a shedding of those things. The same way Nicole had to shed her practice, I had to sell my practice to double down on doing what I do here. I could not do 3 to 5 podcasts a week and do some of the consulting and run the 4 membership communities that I run. I couldn't lead the team effectively if I still also was leaving that practice. Now, I'm not saying you have to leave your practice to do good work, but think intentionally about what is your corner? What is the area that you love digging into, the people, the types of clients, the type of work that lights you up? There's so many ways to make money. You could do so many different things, and you've chosen what you've chosen for a reason. So is that where you want to stay, or do you want to change over the next year, or transform or shift? Sit with those things. It's still the first quarter of the year. You got time this year to make some shifts. So we couldn't do this show also without the organizing principles of Therapy Notes. They keep you organized with your progress notes, with your team, with your finances, with your billing. They even have HIPAA compliant video embedded within their platform. They are the best EHR out there. They will help you stress-free switch over from your current EHR. We've had a ton of consulting clients do that recently because they're just frustrated with some of the other EHRs that have been bought out by big companies, and it's just not the same customer service. So if you're ready to switch, if you want to improve your EHR, head on over to therapynotes.com. Use promo code Joe at checkout. That's going to give you a discount, but also it's going to let them know that things like this podcast work for their marketing so they can keep investing in podcasts like this. Thank you so much for letting me into your ears and into your brain. Have an amazing day. I'll talk to you soon. Special thanks to the band Silence is Sexy for that intro music, and this podcast is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information in regard to the subject matter covered. It is given with the understanding that neither the host, the producers, the publishers, or guests are rendering legal, accounting, clinical, or other professional information. If you want a professional, you should find one.